What can we do about it? Joining me now is David Gergen, CNN senior political analyst, and Ruben Navarette, a CNN.com contributor. Welcome to both of you.
Good morning.
David, let's start with you because you say that maybe voters should look in the mirror and maybe we are in part to blame for the chaos that reigns in Washington these days.
Well, first off, Carol, let me say what a pleasure it is to be with Ruben. He's a former student who's continued on. I didn't knock him off on the road to success. He continued right on. But we both agree, I think, that to a considerable extent, we get the government we deserve. Ruben's just written about that. And we tend to blame all the politicians, and they do deserve a lot of blame. But they also reflect the differences and the deep divides within the country itself. The consensus that we had growing up about America's role in the world, about government at home, its role here at home, we lost that. That consensus was shattered during the Vietnam War, Watergate, and the years that followed. And ever since then, we've been a pretty polarized people, and we send people to Congress who reflect that polarization.
Well, wait a minute,
we
David.
worry about the results.
Wait a minute, David. What about the vast middle we always hear about? We hear about, this extremes of the party control the primaries, but there is a vast middle in this country that does pretty well in the general election.
I was just down at Southern Methodist University earlier this week with Bob Gates, the former Secretary of Defense, who had been in Washington for 8 presidencies. He said one of the biggest threats to our national security is right here at home, and it's the disappearance of the middle. The disappearance of the middle, it helped to hold us together. Increasingly, people have moved more toward the extremes, either extreme right or extreme left, and left that middle. There are some people out there still. Now, the refrain is, well, what about all these independents we hear about? If you look more closely at the broad swath of independents, about half of them, according to a Pew survey, actually are Democrats or are Republicans who don't particularly like to carry that label, but that's how they vote very consistently.
Oh, so they're sort of like... they don't want to come out and say that they're Republican or Democrat, but they really are.
Right.
So, but they call themselves independents anyway.
Right, exactly.
And we have a poll up there. That's the Pew Research poll you were talking about, David.
Good. Thank you.
See, we have it on the ready. Ruben, do you agree? Because you have written opinion pieces taking a more traditional view of why our government is broken.
Right, absolutely. I'm not about to disagree with my friend and former professor. I think David has exactly right. It's not just a question of getting the government you deserve, but also the government that you'll tolerate. And when you have this kind of gridlock, if there isn't a price to be paid for it, if in fact you don't start replacing members of Congress or taking it out of their hide, so to speak, they're going to continue on their way, and you're going to get exactly what you've put up with. But I think there are also other reasons that this comes to the forefront. And there is this sort of mixed messages, I think, that people send to members of Congress. On the one hand, they say that they want them to compromise. On the other hand, you can get a pretty good pummeling out there if you're seen as too soft, too willing to compromise. Look at the grief that President Obama is getting from the left because he is seen as too quick to cave into Republicans, too quick to compromise. So, I'm a little sympathetic to politicians who, if they just want to give us what we want, they're not always sure what that is because we seem to want and ask for different things. There's also this interesting dynamic that I've noticed recently where on really tough issues, David used to talk about in class, things like Social Security reform. Well, if you can't get into that, the next best thing is to somehow blame the other party for being the obstructionist on that issue. It happens on immigration. President Obama did this just yesterday in meeting with the Hispanic Roundtable. He said, I'd love to pass immigration reform, but it's those darn Republicans who won't let me. So you're able to score points off the other guy. Even when you do nothing, you can still come out the winner.
And David, you're sort of saying voters kind of like that, even though they won't admit it, because the voters themselves are like that.
That's right, and to go to Ruben's point, what we've seen is that a number of prominent senators in recent years, for example, who have tried to work in the middle, who have tried to work with the other side, have either become so frustrated they've gone home, or they've been beaten in primaries by someone more extreme than they are, and that there is a huge price now for working in the middle because the force and is coming from the edges and not from the middle. And look at the Howard Baker or Bill Cohen or Bill Bradley or Jack Danforth. You can go through a lengthy list of people we all looked up to and said they really made the compromises and the deals that kept the country moving forward. Of course, we've always had a fractious politics. Of course, we've always had people with different points of view. But we've had people we call statesmen. And it's like it's almost an archaic word now. People who actively worked to see if they couldn't bring the best out from both sides and at least reach an agreement that enabled us to go forward instead of this kind of paralysis and poison that we now have.
Right, we love our politicians we love tough talking people. That's just sort of the American way. But
absolutely.
Maybe the next generation of voters will have the answers. Do you suppose, Ruben?
That's a hope. I spoke to a couple of authors yesterday who are baby boomers themselves, and they have this very interesting theory. They think the reason our government is broken and gridlocked is because baby boomers have, throughout their entire lives, have this sort of moral superiority about themselves, whether they be on the right or the left. You have now conflict in Washington, in Congress, between people who are just not ready to move off their values because they think that that's the last thing they want to do is negotiate their values. They need to understand that what you believe and what you believe in are really two different things, and they should be willing to negotiate. But maybe when younger people come to the forefront, there'll be more of a sense of consensus and working together, but not for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah. Let me break in over there, Carol, because I have had the privilege now of working with the younger generation for a number of years, people like Ruben. And what I have found is the younger generation is different, and it's very encouraging. You get these young veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. Their political coloration doesn't matter so much as what they care about is building a country they fought for. And you've got people like in Teach for America or in City or a number of these other organizations who go out in the tough neighborhoods and engage in service to the country at the age of 19, 20, 21. And as a result of that, they become very committed to improvement. And again, in Teach for America, there are a lot of kids who probably vote Democratic, but they like Republican ideas on public education reform. It's really interesting. And so the party labels don't matter so much to this younger generation. I don't think they have all these hang-ups. And I think it's a very promising generation.
Gosh, I hope you're right. David, we cannot let you go without asking you about this wild night of skinny dipping with George Clooney, because CNN actually tracked down George Clooney to ask him about that little incident. Listen.
So then I said to David Gergen, well, you know, Walter Cronkite jumped in the lake, and then I got Gergen to do it, and then I think Charlie Rose to do it as well. So I'm getting all these world-class journalists drunk and dumping them in the lake.
David, we need some splaining.
Well, it's been a little bit overblown. Let me just say it was not skinny dipping, but George Clooney has invited me to come spend a weekend with him because I was doing an interview with him for Parade magazine about a new film, political thriller that's coming out in early October, The Ides of March. So of course I went. It was a hoot. Of course I'd go spend a weekend at Lake Como in Italy. Gorgeous place. And he turns out to be not only just a classy person, but a master host, very gracious.
We want to know about the skinny dipping, David.
Okay, so my final night there were a group of guys there, and we had a long dinner, and it went on and on and on. It was wonderful. We talked and laughed a lot, but I also got hammered. I think the rest of the guys did too. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, he hops up, and we're all sort of pretty raucous, and he climbs his fence above the lake, and fully clothed, jumps. and then he's challenging the rest of us. You know, this is a challenge to our manhood. Well, I wasn't sure what I really wanted to climb that damn fence, but I thought I got a plane to catch in about 4 hours. So I said I'm not going in fully clothed. I stripped down to my boxers and jumped. Thought I might die up there, jumping in the dark, but
hey, I would have done the same thing, David.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. Fortunately, no one drowned.
Look at Ruben. Oh, my old professor down to his boxers with George Clooney. I never thought I'd see it.
Well, he is a classic. He was a really gracious host. I must say that about him.
I'd like to experience that myself someday. Thanks to you both. It's been fun.
Okay, thank you.
David Gergen and Ruben Navarette.
And just, I mean, if George